Let me set the stage. I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 6 years. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was solid. Or at least, I thought it was. Sarah and I always had open communication, a deep trust in one another, and we shared everything. But over the past few months, something started to feel different. It began with little things, things I could have easily ignored. Sarah started working late. At first, she'd call or text, telling me she had extra work, and I didn't think twice about it. She's always been hardworking, and her dedication to her job was one of the things I admired about her. But as the weeks turned into months, her excuses started to sound repetitive. She'd come home late, claiming her boss, Mark, was pressuring the team to meet tight deadlines. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But there were moments that made me second-guess everything. One night, she came home wearing a perfume I didn't recognize. I casually asked her about it, and she laughed, brushing it off, saying she'd tested fragrances with a coworker during lunch. The explanation seemed innocent enough, but something about the way she avoided my eyes made my stomach turn. I let it go, convincing myself I was overreacting. Then there was her phone. Sarah had always been open about her phone, leaving it on the table, unlocked, not caring if I picked it up to check the time or browse the web. But recently, she'd become protective of it. I'd see her texting, a smile flickering on her face, but if I asked her what was so funny, she'd lock the screen and say, "Oh, nothing important." It felt like she was hiding something, and no matter how much I tried to shake the feeling, it kept gnawing at me. Last Friday was the breaking point. Sarah told me she had a work dinner to attend and might be home late. Her voice was calm, but there was something off, something I couldn't place. As she got ready, I couldn't help but feel like she was putting in more effort than usual. She wore a dress I hadn't seen in a while, styled her hair differently, and even applied makeup, which she rarely did for casual outings. My gut screamed at me, but I smiled and wished her a good night. The moment she left, I grabbed my car keys and decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it. I hated that it had come to this, but I needed answers. I parked a few spaces away from her office and waited. It was almost 7 p.m. when I saw her step out of the building. My heart sank when I noticed she wasn't alone. Mark, her boss, was with her. They laughed and chatted as they walked to his car, and I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I followed them, keeping a safe distance. They drove to a nearby hotel. I parked in the lot, my hands shaking as I watched them walk inside together. My worst fears were coming true. Sarah, the woman I loved and trusted, was having an affair with her boss. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, debating my next move. Should I storm in and confront them? Wait for them to come out? Call her and demand an explanation? My mind was racing, and I couldn't think straight. In the end, I decided to take photos. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures of them entering the hotel. About 2 hours later, they emerged. I expected them to look guilty or flustered, but instead, they looked serious. Mark handed Sarah a folder, and she nodded before they got into separate cars and drove off. Confusion clouded my anger. What was in that folder? I followed Sarah home, parking a few minutes after her to avoid suspicion. She greeted me like nothing had happened. I couldn't believe how composed she was, acting like she hadn't just been at a hotel with another man. The next day, while she was in the shower, I couldn't resist. I found the folder in her work bag and opened it. What I saw inside turned everything I thought I knew on its head. The folder was filled with documents and emails, evidence that Mark had been embezzling money from their company. Sarah had discovered his scheme and was gathering proof to report him. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling. She wasn't cheating on me. She was risking her career to expose her boss's crimes. That night, I confessed everything. I told her I'd followed her, seen her with Mark, and gone through the folder. She was furious at first, understandably so. But as I apologized and explained my fears, her anger softened. She admitted she hadn't told me what was going on because she didn't want to drag me into it. Mark was a dangerous man, and she didn't know how far he'd go to protect himself. In the end, Sarah reported Mark, and he was fired and arrested for embezzlement. Our marriage survived the ordeal, but it wasn't easy. I learned a hard lesson about trust and communication. Sarah forgave me for doubting her, but it took time for us to fully rebuild the trust we once had. Looking back, I'm grateful I didn't confront her in the heat of the moment. Sometimes things aren't what they seem, and jumping to conclusions can ruin everything. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that trust is fragile and worth fighting for.